So I get asked this question a lot. How do you become a full-time custom knife maker? Well, the answer may surprise you. So stick around and I'll tell you. Now, as you can imagine, there's not a straightforward answer to this. It's complicated, but we'll get an answer for you and it'll make sense. But first, we need a little backstory. So I started making knives over 30 years ago. And at the time, you know, I had a very good job, full-time job, very well-paying full-time job. And so my knife making was, you know, a hobby. My ambitions were not a full-time knife maker. Now, I loved it, but that was definitely not a goal at the time. It was just to make good, high-quality knives. I wanted to make good knives better than what I was buying. You know, I hunt and fish, and I wanted high-quality knives for what I was doing. And then, you know, I started making and selling them. And so my customers were all the same kind of clients. They were hunters and fishermen, outdoorsmen. And to this day, that's who my main target is. So basically, I just wanted to make a better knife, and I enjoy doing it. And then the interest piles on. As you know, if you're a knife maker, it is a sickness and it gets a hold of you quick. So my journey began. So I'm getting set up here to do some counterboring on some frame locks. Get this counterbore tool mounted in here. Now, like everybody else, I started out with no tools, sandpaper and files to make my first knives. They were strictly stock removal. And, you know, it takes time to gather the tools you need. I wasn't independently wealthy, but I also couldn't run out and buy all these expensive tools. I had to save my money to get them, and I didn't have anybody gifting them to me, you know. So today I have a lot of tools. They're old, but they get me by. But it took years to collect them, and I'm still collecting. I build a lot of my own tools as well. So I got to cut this counterbore in this frame lock down about 70 thousandths for the head of the screw. So I spent many, many years working for the man. And one day it clicked. I had to make a decision. And I'll tell you how I got to that point. But I could make that decision based on all of those years of making knives and building a clientele. When I say that, I mean, I had a lot of people that bought knives from me, and they were return customers. I continued to buy tools and upgrade my tools and get more and more return customers. And there's even more to the backstory that influenced my knife making career. Around 14 years old, I got heavily involved in the martial arts, in particular, a system called Jeet Kune Do. It's not a style, it's not even a system, it's a philosophy coined by the late Bruce Lee. And because of the underlying or basic functions of the philosophy, there's 4 ranges of combat: kicking, punching, trapping, and grappling. And naturally, using weapons would be in one of those ranges. So I started making knives that I called tactical knives. But let me just say this. A tactical knife is any knife you have in your hand. You can make a pencil tactical. It's a very abused word. So I was young, and I didn't really understand that. And I went off into making tactical knives. So because of that, and because of the philosophy of Jeet Kune Do, it means way of the intercepting fist, by the way. But it's basically adapting defensive fighting or offensive fighting to you. And within those 4 ranges of combat. So I got heavily involved in Kali, and it's a Filipino martial art. And I trained with some of the most notable people at the time. Dan Inosanto. I trained with Larry Hartzell in grappling. I was one of Ted Wong's last apprentices. And so I had a good, well-rounded training experience. And a lot of years, I traveled all over the country. I'd work and save, I would do everything to save my money and to do training. So I did a lot of knife training, a lot of stick training. And so I tried to adapt my knife making to my knives that would work tactically. So that was something that influenced me very much in the knife making journey. And I feel very privileged and blessed to have trained with 3 of Bruce Lee's original students, probably his favorites. You'll find Dan Inosanto and Ted Wong featured in the earlier books that the Bruce Lee estate put out by O'Hara Publications back in the 80s. But, Dan was a Filipino, and he was, very well trained in Kali. And so that's why he naturally brought Kali to the game, and that's why you see Bruce Lee, who made the nunchucks and the Kali stick so famous in his films. It was because of Dan Inosanto. But I feel very privileged to have trained with them, and to be quite honest, I, kind of thought that I would eventually make a career out of that, and I somewhat did. I had a school gym in my old hometown, and I taught a private class to lots of people. Even got to teach some LSU students and law enforcement. And so I got to work with a lot of people. And you may ask, why were you teaching LSU students? Well, these were football players. And when you consider trapping and grappling mixed in a lineman's toolbox, it's very effective. So that's the kind of stuff I worked on. And I enjoyed working with law enforcement. It was close range stuff, close range combat, knife and gun. And so I was, working toward a career in that. So the tactical world was highly affecting my knife making world. And it was a blend of things that were going on there. But that's not all the story. Now, of all of those years of training and stuff like that, yes, I got in lots of scrapes. I never was a troublemaker, but I got in one knife fight. Now, I didn't have a knife. I was attacked by a knife, and I got cut. Now, I come out on the good end, but the guy used a buck 110, I think it was, and I had that knife up until a few years ago. It's a long story, but he has that knife today. But it did teach me a few things, but it also made me dive deeper into the tactical, even though all he had was a buck 110. And it's almost inevitable. If you get into a knife fight, whatever, no matter how cool the blade looks, no matter how much training you've had or whatever, you're gonna get cut. And I've done a lot of knife sparring and training, and we used certain kinds of fake blades to mark, and you get pretty tore up. And it's a whole other subject when it comes to close range combat, which 98% or more will end up there in the grappling range and on the ground. There was one more thing that defined my martial arts career and that really changed my whole way of thinking, and it was the time I had a gun pulled on me in front of my children. And I used no weapons, no tools of any kind, no kicks, no punches. I was able to use psychology. I talked him down. And so I understood what the late Bruce Lee meant when he said that Jeet Kune Do was the art of fighting without fighting. Psychology is what saved my life there, and probably some blessings from above. So that kind of changed my perspective about self-defense. You must have psychology in your toolbox. Use your head. So this knife design is heavily influenced by my experience hunting, fishing, and my martial arts days. I retired from the martial arts once I started hurting all over, shoulders, elbows, knees, you name it. But this knife is this knife that I carry every day. It's a frame lock flipper and is a clip point style. And it is a great all-around knife for me. This is what works for me, and I make and sell a lot of them. But there's more to this backstory.
More backstory? What does this have to do with full-time knife making?
Well, yeah, don't you want to know what influenced my knife making career? What led to me being a full-time knife maker?
Good grief.
Don't get your teeth all twisted.
Do tell.
So at the same time that I was practicing martial arts, making knives, I had also been on a filmmaking adventure career. I started that even earlier as a small kid, got a Super 8 camera and started doing shorts and animated shorts and things like that. We didn't have internet back then for none of this, just you have to remember that. So a lot of it was learned on my own. All of my filmmaking was learned on my own until I got older and got into the filmmaking community. And I got an agent and was acting, and I eventually started directing, writing, producing. I was doing director of photography projects for other filmmakers. And I got to work with a lot of famous Hollywood celebrities. I eventually got out of that career just a few years ago. I had a film company and made a couple feature-length films that I wrote and directed. And let me just say that the market wasn't there for them. I got out of that career for reasons I won't get into, but let me just say they're snakes. And, I've been asked, why don't you go on Forged in Fire? Well, I was asked to go on Forged in Fire. The producers contacted me several years ago, and the first thing I asked them, well, what's the pay rate? And, well, you only get paid if you win. Well, from having the experience of working in the film industry, and I worked on lots of TV productions, you name it, and as a SAG member, and even as a non-union member, you get paid. The whole cast and crew gets paid. And here it is, these people weren't gonna pay none of the cast except the winner. Yeah, they feed you and take you up there. Now, if you just wanting to be on TV, awesome. I didn't want to be on TV. I'd been on TV, so it wasn't an aspiration. They're not gonna make you famous. They barely mention your name, and there's no marketing for you when you leave. And so, yeah, I turned it down. So my film career ended a few years ago whenever my company basically went down. And also with what I saw going on in the industry, I didn't like it. The the biggest drama queens in the world is actors. And I worked as an actor, so I know what it was like. I was around them, but when you're a director and running a production and creating films, and you've got drama and other things, but all of that, you know, was going on while I was making knives. And when I left the film career, I went into another adventure to supplement my income, because I wasn't a full-time maker at that time. So I went on the road doing other things. Yeah, and it was in the height of the pandemic. Now, during all of those years of everything that I was doing, everything going on in my life, I was, you know, raising a family, buying cars, boats, and things for knife making, tools. And, you know, I still had, you know, I was keeping up with a few clients I had, but I still didn't have any ambition to be a full-time knife maker. But when we went full-time into the film business, you know, I had been acting, there was a side gig and doing other projects for the film industry to the side. But when I went full time, you know, I was doing internet ads and commercials and business documentaries, you name it, we were doing it. There was a market for it. And so that was the direction I was going to go. I was going to, you know, eventually leave my job in the oil field, which I did, and went full time. That lasted several years, and during that time I took a break from knife making, particularly custom orders. I made a handful of knives, but that hurt me. It hurt me in advancing and growing in the knife industry and the community. And you know, but the market was still there. People were still contacting me for knives and wanting knives, and you know, I just took a break. And when that failed, I went on the road. Our company failed, and regardless of what you see on networth.com about me, don't believe that. Whatever I gained in the oil industry to leave to go to the full-time film industry, I lost. And I went on the road working on my tools, doing whatever I could to make a living. But I was still making knives. Now I started making more knives for customers because I needed extra supplementation. And the market just started growing, and I was marketing myself. And then something happened. still quite a bit left to do on these frame locks. Grind the blade, grind the lock face, contour them, all of the work that has to be done on the frames, and anodizing. Now, once I went on the road and was working, like I said, I was building my clientele, continuously marketing myself, and then the big pandemic happened, and I was working in the medical field all over the country. I had lost my mother, and my father got sick with what was causing the pandemic. And I decided to stay home where I could be close to him, because I didn't do that with my mother. I was on the road and I really regretted it. I stayed home, and while I was home, I started making knives full time. So I had the market, I had the years of experience, had the clientele, all of that, the tools. And then it came to me. I had no choice. I had to do something because I wanted to be here with my father, close to my father. And I lost my father, and I just stayed with this job. And so there's no real easy answer to the question, how do you become a full-time knife maker? Well, it just happened with me. But you know, if you get the training and the years of experience and build a clientele, you do all of that. A lot of people will say, how do you set price on your knife? Man, that depends on the individual and your market and supply and demand. It's basic stuff. I see this question asked all the time, and it's just simple economics, supply and demand. If people want your knives and you can't make them fast enough, then your prices, you know, are reflected in that. And it has a lot to do too with your training and people, your notoriety, and your, you know, in the knife making community. All of that matters. So you can't just say, here's how you calculate the price for your knives, and here's how you calculate when you want to be a full-time knife maker. I won't say this is easy. It is not. I work 6 and 7 days a week. I work late at night. Not just the knife making, but the marketing, like YouTube. This is another marketing avenue for me. And I'm all over social media. Some of them are friendly, some are not. And what I mean is the platforms like Instagram. You do all of that, and you know, life situations, whatever. Now, I'm not talking about production knives and factory knives where you got some money and you know, you've got a market out there. There's always a market for knives, production knives, but I'm talking about custom knife making. It's up to you. Nobody's going to hand it to you. Nobody's going to give you tools. There's no cheap, good tools to speak of. You know, I see those questions all the time. Where can I find a cheap, good power hammer or cheap, good grinder? If it was, you know, it's just not that simple. And it takes years to collect your tools. It took me years, and I'm still collecting. I'm still learning. I still get training. I still go to training. You know, you have to be like water, like the late Bruce Lee would say. And you constantly adapting and changing and learning. I'm thankful to the friends that helped me, the master smiths, the old time makers that you know, took the time to train me and help me, and they still do. But I hope that answers your question and helps you some kind of way. But I want to thank my patrons. I want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.